Who in their right mind would name a game Killer is Dead? Possibly one of the worst names I've ever seen for a game, yet it doesn't stand out from the library of games developed by Grasshopper Manufacture. In fact, Killer is Dead doesn't stand out much at all, being largely forgotten thanks to its abysmal reception. 64 on Metacritic, IGN gave it a 5, hell, they didn't even bother to do a video review for the game. By all metrics, Killer is Dead is a bad game. Now what if I was to tell you that they were all wrong? Killer is Dead is a masterpiece, and I'm not hyperbolizing. So why then did the game flop in every sense of the word, yet it was one of my best experiences all year? Let's find out. Suda51. That's a name you'll hear lots in this video. The mastermind behind No More Heroes and some other niche cult classics, he founded Grasshopper Manufacture. He was always very involved in the game making process, often filling multiple roles including director, writer, and designer for a multitude of his games. Quickly, he became too known for his interesting visual styles and creative stories, with games such as The Silver Case and Flower, Sun and Rain. While these games weren't massive successes critically, they were games he wanted to make, and his passion was evident in the games themselves. This garnered him and his studio relative success in the East, but it wasn't until 2005, with his latest release Killer 7, that he was able to break into the Western market, and break in he did. The game was an instant cult classic, as dumb as that may sound. Reviewers quickly identified the game to have limited appeal, but that didn't matter. The game was received very well, with 8s all around. The game wasn't for everyone, but that didn't matter. Its style and adult themes prompted questions about games being a form of art, in a way that many other games didn't. IGN named it GameCube's best game no one played in 2005, but that didn't matter. Killer 7 made the name Suda51 known worldwide, even prompting development of remakes for his earlier games. But he didn't stop there. 2 years later, once again directing, designing, and writing, he released No More Heroes. And well, we know how that went.
Travis, it's kill or be killed. Fuckhead!
Once again praised for its unique story and art style, people were starting to notice a pattern with Suda51. He made games how he wanted, not because of what was popular or what big companies wanted. His games were clearly made with a personality, which many other titles lacked. People wanted more from Grasshopper, wanted more from Suda51, and over the next few years, that's what they got. No More Heroes 2, Cyan Mora, Lollipop Chainsaw, which in my opinion is a much better name than Killer is Dead. These releases, whilst not always reviewed amazingly, cemented Suda51 as a game maker, and people were always excited to see what was to come from him next. And in 2013, it seemed that the next game was just over the horizon, and it was Killer is Dead. While early development can be dated all the way back to 2009, it only properly started its development in early 2011. The actual development of the game was pretty smooth and therefore quite boring. What is less boring is how the name Killer is Dead came to be. Inspired by the song The Queen is Dead by the English band The Smiths, the project was given the placeholder name Killer is Dead. However, over time, the great Suda51 began to feel the name matched up well with the style he was going for. Suda51 had a lot to say about Killer is Dead before its release, telling Famitsu the key words for the game: moon, earth, love, and of course, brilliant game. I mean, how else would you describe the game you're making? Even with Suda's great words of wisdom, there is some debate about the actual amount he contributed to the game. Suda did do the writing for the game, that is true, but he was only one of many writers. No longer was he multitasking, directing, and designing on top of writing, and according to many gaming news outlets, it shows.
It was the best of times, it was the blurst of times, you stupid monkey! You shut up.
The role of director was handed off to one Hideyuki Shin, who in research for this video, I found didn't even have a Wikipedia page. No, I'd searched deep in the depths of the internet for this mysterious man. Who was he? What did he want with the amazing Suda? What impact did he have on Killer is Dead? After months, years of searching, I found my answers. Before Killer is Dead, he'd only worked on art and graphics for football games. Never before had he directed or even co-directed. I'm all for giving developers a chance, but if his last work before directing your game is a special thanks in PES 2012 2 years prior, I think there may be some problems. Okay, so an inexperienced director, the great Suda51 not having his usual impact on his games, and a name which sounds like it's a result of an Xbox name generator are all not good signs. This may raise some concerns, but the game could still be good, right? Right? In 2013, we got our answer, and it was a resounding no. Well, what do they know? After all, I do hold the world record speedrun for Hentai Shooter 3D. So I think it's finally time for us to delve into Killer is Dead. After all, the mission?
Killer is dead. Good job. Killer is dead.
Killer is Dead has one of the best openings I can think of in recent memory. A newspaper reads, "Girl kidnapped," before a camera moves to follow a shadow. The setting is a dark alleyway, and we see this shadow carrying a sword. On the other end of the alleyway, a man stumbles forward before transforming his arm into a gun. He shoots at the other, who deflects his bullets with his sword. It's at this point you gain control of the sword wielder and are tasked with simply walking forward and following the other man. As you slowly walk forward, you deflect his bullets with ease. At the end of the alley, the gunman sneaks up behind you, shooting you in the head. However, you aren't dead, and before you know it, you slice the gun from his body. A prompt appears on screen. The title words, "Killer is Dead," echoes against the rain falling, before blood covers the wall. You can call this opening segment a tutorial, but it doesn't actually tell you how to play the game. No, this segment is more like the game showing you, the player, how strong you really are. And more importantly than that, introduces the game's unique art style. To be completely honest, I'm not sure how to describe it. The game is dark, and I mean that quite literally. Shadows practically invade the screen, obscuring much of the surroundings and player models, yet not in an obtrusive way. Personally, I love it. There is practically no other game that is similar to Killer is Dead in look, even in Suda51's library. There's also no game quite like Killer is Dead in terms of story, so let's dive in as I try to explain to you the messy bowl of spaghetti which is the Killer is Dead story. After your 1v1 in the dark alley, you start episode 2 walking down what looks like a hotel hallway. Before you know it, the game throws enemies at you like scrap meat to a dog and expects you to fight them. These enemies aren't particularly hard, but the jump from walking down an alley or to deflecting bullets to having to defeat waves of enemies is stark enough to give you whiplash. No matter though, as before you know it, another cutscene rears its head. You get to see a 14-year-old schoolgirl? Not for long though before she gets bitch slapped. The protagonist, Mondo Zappa, couldn't care less. That's just the kind of guy he is. Mondo tells the mysterious other man that he is his replacement, before they take turns trying to be the biggest alpha male in the room. If you wanted a boss fight to ensue, you'd be sorely disappointed. Instead, you just have to mash X, and then the game cuts to another cutscene. What? This entire episode feels more cuts than a pizza, yet with only a fraction of those slices actually offering any real gameplay. You could argue this is what is expected from a tutorial, but the game has still yet to teach us anything, other than X being the attack button. No matter though, as the rest of the game doesn't suffer from the same pizza-based fate. You are introduced to a new character, Brian. This cigar-puffin half-cyborg is the leader of a group of executioners for hire who also work for the government, which now, as Mondo Zappa, you are now a part of. The episode ends with the words,
Let the killing begin.
which seems fitting for the murderous rampage which ensues. Episode 3 opens with Mondo waking up the 14-year-old schoolgirl from before. Don't worry, I know what you're thinking. They aren't together. At least I don't think so. She is Mondo's assistant, and while she doesn't actually do much assisting, she at least acts as a good comic relief between the brutal executions. They turn up to work, and alongside Brian is a work-appropriately dressed blonde woman. Her name is Vivian, and she's the last member of Brian's organization. Her role is to... actually I'm not too sure what her role is. Complain about wanting more money? And no, that's not me being a massive sexist, it's the game. Don't believe me? Just wait till we get to the side missions. Eventually, you meet your first client. Robert, the artist, complains about a monster which is terrorizing his village, and as you can guess, it's up to you to stop him. Mondo and his assistant, whose name is Mika, are dropped off at the location, and Mondo shows us just how cool he really is by saying the name of the game? He does this practically every single episode. It's fucking hilarious.
The job? Killer is dead.
You enter the house, but before any killing can happen, you meet Scarlet. Scarlet is great at sucking? Blood sucking. Blood that is. Comes up by her massive syringe. She offers you optional side missions, which you can unlock more by finding her in hidden spots throughout each episode. After meeting Scarlet, you come across another girl, yet this one is a little less interested in any sucking. She asks for Mondo's help, introducing herself as Alyssa. She tells Mondo that her older sister, who is called, now stay with me on this one, Alice, has gone crazy. According to Alyssa, a scary looking man has turned her sister Alice crazy, and therefore it's Mondo's job to save her. You then enter, well, this. Nowhere else in the game looks like this, which I think is Killer is Dead's greatest strength. Each episode is so unique in art style and its mechanics that I can vividly remember each of them even weeks after I played them. When I first saw this room, I just thought, what the fuck, I love it. And I had that feeling multiple times playing Killer is Dead. After entering a door which magically appears, you're given the first real combat encounter in the episode. More basic enemies, which is fine considering it's all still very early in the game. However, I couldn't help wanting more, such as having distinct enemies for each location. These bland, black robot things appear throughout the entire game, and while there are variations they're sort of just stronger or bigger, they aren't area specific. You clear the room and are rewarded a cupcake? Yep, that tracks. You give Alyssa the cupcake, which in turn shifts the room around, opening a new door. Again, you clear the room, are given an item, and return it to Alyssa. She then sees the exact same voice line she did before, which is just hilariously stupid.
Thank you.
In general, sound effects are reused often, and are usually basic stock sound effects, like the jar breaking noise, which I'm pretty sure even God used for his simulation. After some more killing and stock sound effects, you finally move on. You find Alyssa once again. This time she was complaining about a pain in her back. In her own words, it's since she took a vacation to the moon. I do hear that space travel can be a bit taxing on the old back. Then she does this? Now, I'm not a medical professional, but this can't be good. And if you think that's bad, she then turns into a weird spider thing with boobs? You've finally given your first real boss fight of the game, and it's alright, nothing crazy. You stab her, dodge attacks, shoot her down from the ceiling. Wait, have I not mentioned that you have a gun? Much like the guy from the beginning, you have a robotic gun arm. Pretty standard stuff really for Killer is Dead, nothing crazy. After 2 full health bars, you can finally execute the target. The game once again prompts you to kill her, and for the 3rd time now, you hear the words Killer is Dead played over the top. And trust me, this will not be the last. If you didn't figure it out by now, that entire chapter was influenced by Alice in Wonderland, and for a first mission, it wasn't too bad. While the actual combat wasn't anything crazy, it was serviceable for a starting mission. The location, however, is a real standout. Not many games would be confident enough to go for something so outlandish and crazy for a starting level, and this confidence oozes from the game from so many different facets. Sadly, not all this confidence is placed in the right places, but where it works, it really works. The episode ends in a way that only Killer is Dead can end it. It turns out that Robert the artist was killed by Alice, and it was a ghost who asked for her execution. Why? Who knows, but I love it. Episode 4 is an interesting one. That may seem a moot statement, they're all interesting, but episode 4 in particular is very interesting. The episode opens with Moon River, a beautiful yet slightly creepy woman who lived on the moon, asking for the execution of David. Why? It must be because he's the only person in the entire game to have a normal name. David lives on the dark side of the moon, and it's Mondo's job to get rid of him. Once Mondo gets there, he finds a massive palace built on the surface of the moon. Because that makes total sense, of course. What makes even more sense is the fact that there's oxygen in this place. Wait, why am I getting Persona vibes? You make your way around the palace, killing the same enemies you've seen before. To advance further in the palace, you have to jump through paintings, which teleport you around to different places. Wait, why am I getting Mario 64 vibes? Soon enough, you come face to face with David, who is dressed in what is only fit for a king of a palace. Kamoshida anyone? No? Just me? Okay. Mondo and David go back and forth, making sarcastic remarks and casually breaking the fourth wall. I do have to give it to Mondo though, he can be pretty funny at times. At other times though, the voice acting is subpar to say the least.
Now what? In case you haven't noticed, I'm not a patient guy.
After these two dogs stop fighting, you are finally given a second boss fight. I am a sucker for simple one-on-one fights, against an enemy of similar strength who's often a polar opposite antagonist to our protagonist. Think along the lines of the Jetstream Sam fight in Metal Gear Rising, or any Pokemon rival battle. Compared to the bosses against large enemies or over-the-top enemies, like any Gears of War boss, or even the Persona 5 final boss, I'd rather take a simple one-on-one any day. And that's what the fight against David is. Just two alpha bros, dueling it out with their swords. Before you can kill David, however, he's able to escape just at the last second, as Mondo's robotic arm starts to hurt him. This is because the arm requires blood to be used, which is an actual mechanic in combat, which I'll get to more on later. But for now, David's left, and Mondo failed the mission. Mondo apologizes to Moon River, and offers her to stay with him until he's able to kill David and return her back to the moon. And with that, another girl moves in with Mondo and Mika, and that marks the end of episode 4. But it doesn't mark the end for David, who'll make a return later. Episode 5, as you could guess, another interesting one. But this time there's no client, no execution necessary. Instead, the entire episode takes place within Mondo's dreams. And well, shit gets weird. The aesthetic is pretty lame in comparison to the rest of the game, with its scenery reminiscent to the Bioshock lighthouses. Mondo runs into a young boy, presumably him as a child, playing with a younger Moon River. How do they know each other? I don't know, and I still don't know to this day. With this episode creating more questions than answers for me personally. Not only this, but the episode is just made up of walking around with an occasional cutscene, as the game attempts to dump a bunch of exposition onto the player. You soon find out that Moon River drowns, and this weird masked woman appears? I really don't know how to explain this. You then have a boss fight, if you can call it that, where you have to kill all these robed figures. I mean, sure. It's just very confusing, and from looking at the reviews online, I'm not the only one. Before long, Mondo awakens, and the episode is over. What? From that entire episode, I learnt nothing, didn't have any interesting encounters, or any interesting scenery. All I gained was a bunch more questions as to what in God's name is going on.
Problem with you is, you're completely delusional. I am? Sure.
You could label this as simply the classic Suda51 charm. I would disagree. I think this is simply a result of an overabundance of writers, all with different concepts for the game's story, under an inexperienced director, and the weight of making a game akin to Suda51's previous titles leading to a mismatched, poorly told, cut-up pizza of a story. Thankfully, after what that episode ends, comes episode 6, which is a personal favourite of mine. This time, the client is a musician, whose hearing was stolen by a popular billionaire musician who wanted it for himself. The game wastes no time getting into the action, as it's not before long you can start cutting up the wires. Wires are what the enemy is called, I guess, because the wires are sticking out of them. Creative naming, I know. The popular musician is held up at the top of a large skyscraper, which you have to climb in order to get to him. In your path, hundreds of wires try to stop you, as well as some light puzzle-solving mechanics interspersed between waves of wires. This episode really puts the focus heavily on the combat, with a lack of cutscenes comparatively to other episodes. When you finally reach the top of the tower, sat in a chair in front of Mondo as a skeleton, vibrating with some headphones on. he explains to Mondo his plan to transmit sounds of malice throughout the world. The interaction between these two shows the strength of the voice acting behind Mondo.
Sorry, I think I missed a few key points there. So, could you start over with this grand plan of yours?
Which is the work of Patrick Seitz, who is more commonly known for his voice acting work in anime. At times his work can be jarring in Killer is Dead, and at other times his performance is spot on. Once again, I have to attribute this to an inexperienced director, as Patrick's skills as a voice actor speak for themselves in his other works, such as Egil in Sword Art Online and Dio in JoJo's. Yeah, same guy. After some more talking, guess what? You have to fight. While this does fit into the category of boss fights where the enemy is large equals boss, the standout here is the scenery. The first part of the fight is simple, with the boss himself not being too challenging. However, after the first health bar depletes, that's where the fight becomes awesome. The floor begins to fall from the sky, and you're given a time limit in which you have to kill this musician or you will lose. This shifts the focus from defending and attacking to a full-out assault, and it feels awesome. The music is also pretty damn good, making this a standout boss fight in a game with a plethora of amazing ones. Button prompt, Killer is Dead, return to the office, yada yada. This formula doesn't really change, yet it doesn't have to. Well, apart from the fact that the deaf girl killed herself and became a bird, that's pretty new. Episode 7 opens with a large tiger killing a bunch of men and then fusing with a Yakuza member. At this point, nothing could surprise me. This Catboy is your target, and being that he's a member of the Yakuza, the setting is appropriately themed. Cherry blossoms, large bamboo shoots, murderous wives trying to kill you, it's all here. In order to reach your target, you're tasked with finding 5 hidden scrolls throughout the area, which ninjas are holding. These are actually quite well hidden, such as being underneath a bridge. Thankfully, the game incorporates a vibrating mechanic when close to these ninjas, so finding each scroll isn't too hard. Once found, a duel follows, and these ninjas are a considerable step up from the enemies fought previous. In order to kill them, you have to utilize all the mechanics of combat: blocking, dodging, punching. I guess now is as good a time as any to delve into the combat of Killer is Dead. By repeatedly pressing X, you'll attack with your sword. Pretty standard stuff. B is to dodge and block, and left trigger is to aim with your gun, and right trigger is used to shoot. This isn't any groundbreaking stuff as far as 7th generation hack and slashes go. What new mechanics they do introduce here include the shield breaking move, where you have to repeatedly punch an enemy with Y to break their block. The other more nuanced mechanics all revolve around the blood system I mentioned earlier. From cutting enemies into meat cubes, you're given blood signified by this meter here. Blood has many uses, such as an instant kill slice and the bullets used in the gun. There are other mechanics at play here also, such as a flurry attack style perfect dodge and a circular heavy slash. You can also unlock new moves and mechanics from the in-game store, such as an uppercut attack and dodge rolls. However, there are also some mechanics which feel integral to the game yet aren't available from the start, such as being able to convert blood to health. Furthermore, automatic regen is also in the store, meaning that early in the game the only way to gain health is from random enemy drops or hidden in the world itself. The final important thing to note in the combat is the combo meter. While the way it works is identical to any combo system ever, it's how it influences combat which is interesting. At higher combos, your attacks become faster, you gain new moves, and most notably, you're able to perform an execution move where you can choose what the enemy drops when you kill them. Be it health or extra blood, this mechanic heavily incentivizes clever use of the combo system in order to get the most out of the combat, which at times can become very exhilarating when fighting large groups of enemies. Unlike games like Assassin's Creed, enemy attacks aren't clearly signposted to you for an easy dodge or parry. Instead, you actively have to watch your opponents, which when you're completely surrounded, is much easier said than done. Getting back to the story now, after finding the 5 scrolls, you can finally reach the Yakuza boss with a pet cat. What ensues is a Mondo-style typical banter with his target, before an ever-interesting boss fight. This time, the first stage of the fight takes place chasing the tiger through a city on a motorbike, having to attack on either side of you while dodging environmental hazards and the Yakuza's own attacks. Once you deplete its first health bar, the next stage of the fight is once again a simple one-on-one, man versus man. This fight, much like the David fight from earlier, is pretty radical if I do say so myself. Before you can finish the job though, the tiger comes out to play, which makes the fight incredibly harder than before. Again, this is a standout fight, although saying that again makes me question which fights in this game aren't standouts. Once you beat him, the rest follows as expected. Execution, killer is dead, back at the office, and finished. Sadly, no ghosts or flying bird women this time, but that's fine. Episode 8 takes place once again inside Mondo's dreams. Yay, more confusing storytelling. This time though, the parts are populated with enemies, making this clusterfuck of exposition slightly more enjoyable. While you may still be in this weird ocean environment, the game does throw past locations you visited in, such as the hotel in episode 2 or the Japanese setting in the previous episode. Mondo has a weird conversation with his mum, eating eggs, before David stops by.
Hey, hey!
David cuts the eggs into 2, which is reason enough for an execution if I've ever heard one. Oh, and then he kills Mondo's mother, but more importantly the egg thing. Then follows a weird segment where you have to choose who to kill, and as long as you don't choose child Mondo, it's fine. For some reason, then the game decides to replay the last cutscene again for you.
Hello? Hello? I wanted to record a message for you.
To really hammer home the egg thing. This time though, David cuts off Mondo's arm, which explains why he has a robotic one now. If you thought this whole bit was weird, it's about to get a lot weirder. To Mondo's aid comes a magical unicorn who talks to Mondo and carries him into Brian's office? Turns out this isn't a bad dream. Well, it is, but it's also a flashback to how Mondo first met Brian. While this does answer that question, it raises about 10 other ones. Who is the magical unicorn? What happened to Mondo's mother? What happened to the eggs? We never find out the answers, possibly in a setup for a later game? I guess we'll never find out. Episode 9 time, and in my opinion one of the weaker episodes, your target is a researcher who turned himself into a giant and who wrecked an entire city. I think you can see where this is going. I'm not going to spend too long on this episode because, well, it just isn't very interesting. You make your way up another tower, this one much blander than the one seen in episode 6, to reach the giant at the top. This entire fight is what I hate about oversized bosses. In order to damage him, you have to shoot his weak spots, which couldn't be clearer to you if I drew a massive red X on them. Do this twice and then boom, the giant falls and you slice his colossal head off. The episode isn't bad. There's also combat to be had and some light puzzle solving, which isn't made tedious by its scarcity throughout the episode. But if the episode was seemingly taken out of the game, nothing would be missed. The environment is bland, the bosses are slog, and nothing gets advanced in the story. Generally the most forgettable mission, but in a game with such a plethora of standout ones, I'm not too upset. Episode 10 now, and again in my opinion, one of the weaker ones, once again due to a boss fight which is pretty boring. However, this episode does have a lot more going for it. Firstly, the entire thing takes place on a train, with the train itself being the target. Wait, why am I getting Demon Slayer vibes? You make your way through the train, taking out waves and waves of enemies as you go. Then comes one of the funniest and weirdest moments in the entire game for how ridiculous it is in every way. Brian fucking dies. I was in hysterics after this. The game brings back the magical unicorn for whatever this is, and I think this perfectly personifies Suda51. Unexplainable hilarity and style. If only there was more of this throughout the game, maybe it would have reviewed better, but I guess one can only hope. Mondo finally reaches the front of the train, and if you thought the giant boss fight before was bad, then you're gonna hate this one too. Dodge the eyes, attack when stunned, shoot them if you have the chance. The room is cramped, which does make it feel at least a little unique against the large arenas previous. But any fight where shooting is the primary mode of attack feels bad, because this game isn't a shooting game. It's a much better hack and slash, and the bosses which focus on this succeed more. After the fight, you find out that Brian never really died, and now he's back, dripped out to the extreme. Once again, this episode doesn't really do much in the way of story, apart from one crucial detail. That snowball that nearly killed Brian, Mika rolled it down the hill. It turns out that Mika was mind-controlled by the mysterious woman in Mondo's dreams, who I'm still not sure who it really is. Is it Moon River? It's never really explained to us, but instead, episode 11 has her as a target. In order to track her down, Mondo and Mika take a pill which somehow transports them into their dreams. In said dream, Mondo finds a mysterious masked woman, and a fight breaks out. This boss fight is an alright one. It is nothing abhorrently wrong, but it's just pretty standard and overall boring.
Boring!
Block projectiles, dodge giant death lasers, and spam X between her attacks. Pretty standard stuff really. When you finally beat her, you once again see Child Mondo in a cutscene. This time, however, you learn that David, the boss from way back in episode 4, is actually Mondo's brother. And worse yet, he hates soft-boiled eggs. This is just a setup for episode 12, which is the fateful rematch between Mondo and David. This time, however, as brothers. The final episode opens with David meeting Mondo in the office, with his fellow co-workers being frozen in place. The two discuss chess, as you would before fighting brutally to the death, and David explains why he took over the moon. Mondo threatens him, claiming that he will kill David and take it from him. This entire conversation is intense, due mostly in part to fantastic voice acting and creative use of shadows.
You really are an impatient one.
It's my job, you see.
Then you leave me with no choice.
Once again, Mondo breaks the fourth wall, directly calling David the final boss. In games like Sunset Overdrive, fourth wall breaks are used for humor, but in Killer is Dead, they just feel weird and misplaced. But who cares, because we're about to play through one of the best boss fights I've played in years. Well, since Jetstream Sam. Damn, that fight's awesome.
Okay. Let's dance!
Wait, where was I again? Oh yeah. Before the fight actually begins, we once again have to make our way through the same palace seen in episode 4. Call this a warm-up for spamming the X button if you want. No matter though, because before long, you finally meet David again. The beginning plays out almost exactly like it did in episode 4, even down to his ridiculous outfit. Once again, the brothers exchange sarky remarks and sarcastic comments, and then Mondo says one of the most accurate lines of the entire game.
You always talk too much.
The fight then begins, and David is just like he was in episode 4. Once again, an equal rival to Mondo, which now makes sense to the player more than ever. The first phase is the exact same, with David using the same moves. Initially, I was worried that this was the entire fight, just a carbon copy of the first one. I couldn't have been more wrong. This entire game, Grasshopper kept on surprising me with ridiculous boss fights, interesting albeit confusing story, and creative locales. Luckily, they didn't skimp out on the final fight. After the first phase of the fight, David blows up a part of the moon, sending them both hurtling through space. The fight continues on this floating space rock, with both David and Mondo experiencing some anime-level transformations. David looks pretty goofy, while Mondo on the other hand actually turns out to be pretty badass if you ask me. Wait, why am I getting Metal Gear Rising vibes? David changes his attacks completely, making the first phase seem like child's play. This fight is just plain awesome, there's not much more I can say about it. The setting, the boss, the music, all just simply awesome. David then blasts Mondo through space once again, sending him onto a crate on the surface of the moon. They both lose their over-the-top anime transformations, ending up in their respective black and white suits for a final duel, a final fight between brothers. In this final phase, David perfectly mimics Mondo's moveset, making this a true fight between two equals. He constantly attacks, not allowing for any time to regenerate health. This was the best 5 minutes of the entire game, an exhilarating final boss right until the end. And what a way to finish the game, with Mondo sending his sword through his brother upon the fucking moon. The game ends with Moonriver in Brian's office, asking for the execution of a new person, the new ruler of the moon, Mondo. And that's the story of Killer is Dead wrapped up. But what about the side content? The game boasts hours of extra content for the player to enjoy, including a certain few side missions which cause quite a bit of controversy. Gigolo missions, as the game dubs them, involve Mondo having to stare at women in suggestive areas without getting caught. Yep, you can see why this causes problems. Now stay with me on this one. I enjoy these missions. Sure, call me an incel, whatever. But these missions are pretty fun, and genuinely quite challenging at times. The game understands the stupid nature of these missions. They aren't meant to be taken seriously. You stare at a woman's booba, give her a stick of gum, and she rewards you with a drill. That isn't made up at all, I promise. Sure, it's sexist as hell. I'm not trying to defend that. But goddamn does it make for an enjoyable break between missions. You can also take part in a plethora of other side content. Most of these aren't too complicated, simple kill all enemy type deal, usually taking part on the same battlefield you've seen in the main missions. For the most part, these are fun, especially when you get skilled with the combat system and balancing a high combo meter. When you reach a sort of flow state, the combat flows nicely? Obvious, I know, but many times hack and slashes can easily devolve into mindless spam. You can play Killer is Dead by just spamming the X button, sure, but that would be like playing Apex and only using the charge rifle. You're just a scum of the earth. The final notable side content to mention is Scarlet missions. Remember her? I certainly do. In these missions, they are usually combat oriented, so just kill these specific enemies in a given time frame. As previously stated, the combat is fun enough that these challenges aren't annoying, but at times the conditions to pass are just tedious. For example, I have to kill these specific enemies, but if I kill any other ones, I fail? Considering that a lot of your attacks are AoE, this was just a pain to get through. And that's it for Killer is Dead, at least on the content side of things. In order to really talk about everything notable in the game, it's time for a quick fire round.
3, 2, 1, go!
Your health bar and blood meter upgrade over time with regeneration and pickups. You can unlock costumes to increase Mondo's drip. To revive yourself, you mash X as Mika performing CPR on Mondo. I like this. Certain girls in Gigolo missions have certain gifts they prefer, and the more you buy those gifts in the shop, the more they cost. This means you shouldn't waste them and to use them wisely. While it does take blood to shoot the arm gun, without any blood the gun will still shoot just very slowly, allowing you to still complete any necessary puzzles. And finally, because I know you're all wondering, yes, you can see the girls in their underwear with a specific costume. There's easily hundreds more I can say, but this script is already getting too long as it is, so let's wrap this up. Reception wise, as I've already said before, it wasn't great. Bad or middling reviews from all the big names, but that doesn't matter. Just because someone says the game is bad doesn't actually mean the game is bad. When I first saw this game on the shelf at my local Kex, I had never heard of it before. But the cover was so interesting I just had to pick it up. I played through the entire game without reading a single review, and I loved my experience with it through every second. So when I finally searched up the game online to see what others had to say about it, I was shocked to see the numbers. But what I wasn't shocked to see was what the game sat at on reviews on Steam. Currently the game boasts very positive in recent reviews, and overall mostly positive. I think that over time, the game has aged like a fine wine. In a world full of political correctness and games trying to virtue signal with everything they do, it's refreshing to play such a raw, stylish game like Killer is Dead. Sure, it's got issues on top of issues, not to mention its clear sexism and questionable gigolo missions, but it truly values fun above all else. And for the final time, say it with me now.
The job. Killer is dead.
Hi there, thanks for watching my video, it means a lot. If you've watched it all the way through, then I'm sorry. Fuck. I love making content like this, and I hope you guys like watching it too, so give me a thumbs up to let me know to continue making these sorts of videos. And if you enjoyed my content, then consider subscribing. It makes such a huge difference and it's free, so why not? Thanks again.